During one gloomy day, in what looks like an abandoned hospital located deep in the woods, a boy named Ryzen Tasaka is seen going through what seems like a bunch of medical records. Quite perplexed by what he had just discovered, he immediately threw the record to the wall. As he starts to break down due to the heavy emotions he is feeling right now, the boy froze in fear as he heard footsteps coming closer towards the room he is in. It seems like Ray is experiencing a series of unnatural events, and right now, he is being hunted by the monster he is running away from. As the room creaked open, the boy had already accepted his fate and didn't even try to fight back. A dark floating entity then comes closer to him. Although the image of the creature's face is a blur, it is quite obvious that it is in the form of a girl with long hair. With such a defeated look on his face, if possible, Ray asks the creature to take it easy on him, as it would really make him happy. However, the creature didn't even dare to do what Ray had asked her to do. Instead, she went on to grind the boy's flesh into pieces without hesitation, using her long, sharp fangs. Then all of a sudden, the girl's figure suddenly morphed into a spider-looking creature, and at this point, the boy knows he is already done for. But this creature is not someone unfamiliar to Ray. In fact, he still remembers his first meeting with this thing. If his memory serves him right, he vividly remembers that he first saw this thing during the summer of his first year in this village after he left his hometown. During one sunny day in Ray's dorm, his noisy air conditioning suddenly woke him up. He tried fixing it, but it seems like it is clogged because of the massive spider living inside it. Since it's still early in the morning, Ray decided to freshen up and prepare for school first. While at it, he couldn't help but wonder about the spider inside his room. With a size like that, he knows that it shouldn't come from the air conditioning. However, since he couldn't do much about it now, and he still has school to think of, the boy decided to shrug that thought for now. As he was about to watch the news to check on some updates regarding the new case of missing Kusunoki Seiko, a professor at Washio University, he suddenly noticed something odd. When he checked the side of his bed, he was surprised to see that it was now covered with spider webs. However, this just doesn't add up since he was certain it wasn't there yesterday. He couldn't seem to believe it was even possible in the first place. The fact that this massive spider that came out of nowhere made this happen in just 1 or 2 hours while he was sleeping is indeed something amazing yet scary at the same time. But since he doesn't have much time anymore, Ray rushes to go to school and even goes on to jokingly bid goodbye to his newly found spider pet. At first, he thought that the spider would just leave on its own. However, the battle between him and the spider continued for a while. The spider web would appear every day without fail where he could see it. At this point, he was starting to get a bit worried and curious as to what kind of spider this was anyway. So he ended up looking up articles and books about spiders in the university library, but to his dismay, it was in vain. Since he is having a hard time researching about this creature, Ray gives up in the end. After all, for humans, no matter what happens, one just has to experience it several times to get used to it, but for how long will he need to experience it anyway? Days have passed, and Ray has been getting used to the spider living with him in his apartment. As he got home from work, he immediately checked the news to find out that another case of disappearance in Tokyo had occurred once again. Based on what's indicated in the headlines, it seems like the missing girls' school is actually quite close to Ray's dorm. His pondering about these missing cases was suddenly abrupted when his alarm sounded. It seems like he has plans to have a date with his girlfriend today. He has been in a relationship with Kyoko for a month now, and Ray personally feels like it is finally time for him to deepen their connection even further. As he packed his bag to leave, he was suddenly stopped by something. To his surprise, it's actually some web. Thinking this was just an accident, Ray ended up leaving his dorm nonetheless. Little did he know, someone was quite angry at him in the shadows. After a little drive, he and his girlfriend finally made it to the aquarium. Ray looks really happy seeing his girlfriend happy. Kyoko, who looks rather innocent and quite couldn't help but get amazed by the whole place. She even went on to state that staying here feels like they are at the bottom of the sea or something. Since this is one of Kyoko's dream places to visit, the happiness in her sparkling eyes is definitely apparent no matter what angle you look at her. Seeing Kyoko somehow makes Ray wonder why this lovely girl is even his girlfriend. And if he is going to be a little honest about it, he still can't believe it. At this point, Ray starts to wonder what it is that this girl liked about him anyway. Since Ray is literally zoning out at the moment, Kyoko went on to tell him that she is really worried about his state right now. On top of that, Kyoko also went on to start up the conversation since, as she remembers, Ray did mention a while back that he had something to talk about with her. However, since this is a rare date for the two because of how hectic their individual schedules are, Kyoko encourages Ray to brush his worries off for now and just have fun. And just as Kyoko stated, Ray did enjoy the date to make more fun memories with his cute new girlfriend. As the night finally came, after dropping Kyoko at the station, Ray immediately walked back home. On his way to the dorms, he couldn't help but feel a bit flustered at what had just happened to their day. Since this was the first time he and Kyoko had a whole day with one another, Ray couldn't help but be happy about it. However, his joy suddenly changed to confusion when he got home. To his surprise, the front door to his apartment is now covered with spider webs. Since this almost tripped him over, Ray's good mood suddenly disappeared within a second. However, it seems like the worst is yet to come. At first, he thought that the spider webs were just at his front door. But to his surprise, as he finally made it inside his apartment, his whole place was now literally covered in webs. Until now, it has never been this bad. On top of that, this is quite unbelievable considering the amount of web that is impossible to appear within the few hours he was away. On top of that, as he went on to check on the webs, he was quite surprised to see that they are much different than before. It's as if when one is angry, they express their dissatisfaction by messing up everything around them, and this web gives off that kind of energy indeed. But to make the situation even more eerie than it already is, Ray even managed to discover a human hair among the webs. Since this is quite a big deal, Ray couldn't help but overthink about it for now. Even though he tried gaslighting himself into thinking that everything is alright and that he is just imagining things, Ray is certain he is afraid right now. However, everything doesn't add up at all. He hasn't really confirmed any intruders coming inside the house. On top of that, he couldn't really say if the spider was still in his apartment. But knowing that the window was properly closed, Ray is somewhat certain that the spider is still inside his room. But what really worries him right now is the fact that he saw a real human hair lying around his place. However, since he is alone in this big apartment, Ray tried convincing himself that the web was just dirty, which is why it looked like hair. When he finally calmed down, Ray decided to sleep already, hoping everything would turn out alright the next day. However, to his surprise, as he is about to close his eyes, the wind breezes through his bedroom window, and a black silhouette in the shape of a girl suddenly appears right in front of his eyes. Scared for his life, Ray immediately shouted, "Who is there?" To his surprise, a girl with long black silky hair then shows up. Her beauty is definitely undeniable, and Ray was mesmerized immediately. The girl's red, shiny eyes captivated Ray in many ways he never expected. Then to his surprise, he didn't even notice or feel that the girl was literally bending over to him, seemingly trying to seduce him. Without any warning, the girl went on to kiss Ray's neck, licking it with her wet tongue. Ray was rather shocked by what was happening and is still trying to process everything. Considering the girl is still in her school uniform, Ray tries to be as gentle as possible with her, as she may have been going through something, which is why he ends up in his apartment. However, it seems like Ray made the wrong decision doing so since the girl is now starting to bite him with her fangs. To make it even more worse, it seems like she is sucking his blood continuously. At this point, Ray tried to scream for help, but it seemed like he couldn't bring himself to do so. Sucking his blood is one thing, however, Ray actually starts to feel that there is something entering his body. As he was forcing the girl to stop, the girl suddenly kissed him directly on the lips. Ray, who is still shocked at what is happening now, couldn't move an inch. However, even if he wanted to stop kissing this girl, or even do more provocative actions to her, Ray suddenly realized that he couldn't control his body anymore, like literally. His body is now moving by itself, and it seems like the girl is pretty much enjoying it. Ray tried to fight back as he didn't want to do this act out of his own free will. On top of that, he feels like if he doesn't fight, he is betraying Kyoko and their relationship with one another. For a good minute or so, Ray and the girl kept making out. But for a minute, Ray's control over his body came back, so he immediately grabbed the chance to escape this odd situation. However, before he can even leave his apartment, the girl manages to stop him using her webs, and then again, Ray's control over his body vanished once more. At this point, the girl made sure not to let go of Ray no matter what. And to make it even worse, they started making out once again. During these moments, Ray had no power to even fight back. But what hurts his feelings right now is the fact that he actually starts to somewhat enjoy the whole thing. He starts to find the girl beautiful and charismatic. But he knows this beautiful face is not a human, but a monster. Meanwhile, while Rei is literally suffering right now, in other news, the dead body of a second-year student named Maebara Yuko living in Ashinosaka City, who has been missing for some time, has been discovered. According to the news, there was something strange about the body itself. All organs, including the brain, have been removed. The police are currently investigating this horrible murder. But the question is, will they be able to know the truth behind her death? But for Rei, it was at that moment. This charming monster, with a foreign body that evokes fear, caught him, and he was unable to move or even fight for his safety. The next day at the police department, police officer Daisuke Ono went on to see Mr. Matsui Yoshiaki, the leading forensic specialist of the department, to get some of the results of the said autopsy. However, to his dismay, even the lead specialist couldn't even create a conclusion on what really happened to Maebara. It seems like this is the first time Matsui has even seen this kind of unidentifiable body. No matter how much effort they give, they can't seem to determine the original appearance of the said missing girl. The internal organs are missing. Parts of bones have been cut off, only one arm and one leg remained, and just a thin part of skin was still connected to the body. Just thinking about it gives anyone the creeps indeed. Maebara's dead body was like the remains of a wild animal's meal. Based on Daisuke's theory, in order to prevent the murder weapon from being determined, the murderer must have devoured a large part of her body to prevent them from knowing more. Although that is arguably the most plausible theory, but unfortunately, they can't seem to prove that right now. At this point, they can't really say anything for sure. Whether it's the scene or the corpse, they haven't found any traces that would match an animal at all. Even if an animal had eaten her and erased its traces, it is also impossible to prove this theory. Matsui is certain that the cause of death is probably due to excessive blood loss. In the alley at the crime scene, they found a blood stain. So at this point, there is a lot of angle as to the main cause of Maebara's death. So just to be sure, Matsui would like to continue investigating even more. Since, if he is going to be a little honest in his opinion, he personally thinks that this is the work of a ghost or a monster at the very least. However, Officer Daisuke can't bring himself to believe such superstitions. So instead of diving more into that theory, he just went on to get the autopsy report from Matsui and left. Before leaving, Daisuke reminds Matsui to contact him immediately as soon as he makes any further discovery about the case. When Daisuke finally left, Matsui was left alone to wonder by himself. He is quite certain that what happened to Maebara is not the work of a human being at all. As he zoned in on his office ceiling, he was surprised to see a spider right above him. Then he remembered that he had seen a lot of them today for some reason. Since Matsui felt like he had done enough work for the night, he immediately packed up and went straight to the door to finally head home and get some sleep. But something eerie awaits him behind the door. As he turned the knob, he was surprised to see that thousands of spiders are waiting for him on the other side of the door. Then, within a split second, Matsui ended up dying without even having the chance to fight back. Meanwhile, back to Rei. It seems like the sun is already shining, yet he is still stuck with the girl who's been playing with his body the whole night. No matter how much Rei tries to move, his body is kept in a lying position despite his efforts. His blood is being sucked by her, and after that he feels something entering his body. They have been repeating this routine for several days now. At this point, Rei just accepted his fate. When the girl is finally done doing whatever it is she is doing with his body, Rei tries to ask her, or even just talk to her to understand why she is even doing all of these in the first place. However, despite his efforts, it seems like the girl doesn't even understand a word he says. Although not establishing communication isn't good considering Rei's state right now, he has a more serious problem to take care of. So while the girl is still clinging to his side, Rei went on to turn on the TV to watch some news. It seems like Rei was already aware of the news regarding Maebara. According to him, on the second morning after he met her, he saw the news. During that time, Rei's heart almost stopped in fear. This girl, who is tightly hugging him right now, has the same face as the victim in the news. But this doesn't just add up. According to the news, Maebara is already dead. So how the hell is she here with Rei? And that is the only question in Rei's mind right now. Rei starts to formulate some theory inside his mind. Is this Maebara's sister? Or maybe this is someone who goes to the same school and looks exactly like her. However, there is no way that is even possible. That is why, if that were the case, this girl shouldn't be standing in front of him with such carelessness right now. But the victim wore exactly the same uniform as this girl, and their faces match each other perfectly. At this point, Ray finally realizes that something is definitely wrong. Before he even realizes it, they are back at it again. Ray couldn't control his body, and the girl lay on top of him once again. But this time around, Ray managed to notice something. If he is not mistaken, he thinks he saw the illusion of a giant spider. Ray's body now belongs to this girl, and no matter what he does, he can't seem to rebel against her. As he was pinned to the bed, frozen, and couldn't even move an inch, the girl then started her nightly rituals once again. Meanwhile, on the news, the newscaster went on to announce that Yoshiaki Matsui, a 38-year-old man who lives in the police prefecture, has been missing for 20 days now, and we all know what happened to him indeed. On the other hand, Ray, in the last couple of days, showed no signs of resistance. But no matter what he does, he can't seem to escape this woman. No matter how many times he tried, his body was manipulated by a mysterious force that brought him back to the room, and he also tried to keep this monster locked out of his room. However, no matter what he did, the very next moment she was back to her previous position. Even calling for help was pointless because she would always hide when the police arrived. That is why, right now, Ray finds himself every day with this monster, smiling while embracing him. At this point, the only thing that's inside Ray's mind is to know the truth as to what this monster's real intentions really are. When she sucks on his blood, could it be because she is drawing her energy from it, are some of Ray's unanswered questions. On top of that, when that girl kisses him, he can't seem to move his body at all. And all of a sudden, her kisses get more intense day after day. Then, during one of their sessions, Ray received a call from Kyoko. Immediately, he went on to answer the phone. On the other side of the line, we can hear through Kyoko's voice that she is pretty much angry at Ray for not going to school these past weeks. Ray tried to calm her down. However, it seems like Kyoko couldn't help doing so since Ray has been ignoring her messages for the past days as well. Aside from her, Ray's other friends are also starting to get worried about him. Kyoko's voice really shows she is so worried about him, so Ray made it clear to her that he is fine. He then started making up excuses as to why he wasn't able to attend school or message them, and that is because he wasn't feeling well, and he didn't want to worry everyone. Kyoko then angrily tells him that it makes her more worried if he doesn't contact her at all. Hearing Kyoko in distress because of him really aches Ray's heart. However, he doesn't really have a choice considering there are still a lot of things he needs to worry about. Despite him not wanting to lie to Kyoko, but it would be impossible to explain this situation to her. However, Ray was not expecting the next events that would happen. Since Kyoko was near his apartment, Kyoko suggested that she should at least come visit him. And since she is really worried about his health, she even offered to stay with him for the day to take care of him. Although this is such a sweet move, the timing is just not right for Ray. At the back of Ray's mind, if Kyoko comes here, and now, it would be the end of their relationship. While Ray is stressing out, thinking of more excuses to tell Kyoko just to prevent her from coming, the monster girl looks rather happy, maybe thinking that this is the perfect time to execute her plan of breaking this couple no matter what. Back to Ray, as he tries to think of more excuses, it is already too late since Kyoko is already at his front door. She immediately entered the unit and offered to make him some lunch. But since she is planning to spend the night here, Kyoko plans on entering his room to change. Immediately, Ray tried to stop her. At this point, Kyoko is starting to get suspicious and even went on to ask him if there is something she shouldn't see inside. Kyoko stayed silent for a good minute or so. Then, with a flustered look, she went on to tease Ray that since he wasn't in a good physical state, maybe he was looking at some lewd stuff, Kyoko speculated. But she immediately assured him that there is no need to worry since she is a woman who is able to understand this kind of thing. But as a girlfriend, she would want to know her boyfriend's sexual state. And immediately, Kyoko opened the door and rushed into his room. Ray then starts to get worried, telling her that it is very dangerous inside. But to their surprise, there was nothing inside the room. While Kyoko is having a bath, Ray is left in wonder as to where that girl could be. Of course, it looks like it's temporarily impossible to find her silhouette now. This made him wonder if that monster instinctively hides when another person visits. But to make sure Kyoko doesn't get worried about him, Ray tried to calm himself down for now. After a couple of minutes, Kyoko finally finishes taking a bath, and to her surprise, she finds out that Ray is actually reading a journal about the case of serial murders in their area right now. Kyoko then shared some of the information she has about the case. Based on what she has heard, the culprit who had been captured is actually innocent. That is why everyone in town is now worried once again, as the area is not safe to roam around alone anymore. Kyoko also added that based on her observations, the murderer has a high school student among the victims of the murder. In this case, all internal organs have been removed. This shocked Rei, as there is no way that would be even possible. Since they already finished eating and all, Kyoko suggested that they should head to bed now. However, the next turn of events is definitely something Rei wasn't expecting to happen. As they lay flat in bed, the warmth of Kyoko's body really felt in the bed. Despite her innocent-looking face, Kyoko seems to be excited to be in the same bed as Rei. While Kyoko is trying to shove her body toward Rei, on the other hand, looks rather flustered. Although this is indeed a normal thing for couples to do, because of that monster, he has to be extremely vigilant. So when Kyoko tried to initiate the first move to finally do the thing with Rei tried his best to stop Kyoko from pushing any further. It is not because he doesn't want to, but because at times like this, the monster appears. As the girl monster is about to take Kyoko away from Rei goes on to hug Kyoko tightly, while shouting and begging the monster to stop what it is she is about to do. Since Kyoko doesn't know anything about what's happening to Rei right now, she immediately concluded that it was for her. Fortunately, because of what Rei did, the monster disappeared immediately. However, it seems like Kyoko's feelings are now more shattered than ever. Due to the embarrassment she felt, she immediately packed her things up and said goodbye to Rei. Rei tried explaining himself. However, Kyoko was already so embarrassed that she didn't even want to look him in the eyes. Kyoko then went on to state that she just wanted to freshen up her thoughts. She then expresses her feelings, stating that Rei was right. It's true that it's still early for them to do something like that. She understands that maybe she was just in too much of a hurry. However, Rei tried to make her feel better by explaining himself further. But it seems like Kyoko was too embarrassed to have a nice conversation with him. But before leaving, Kyoko made sure that Rei didn't feel any guilt and assured him that there was no need to worry. She also hopes that Rei doesn't start hating her since she loves him so much. Rei also went on to express his love for her while tightly hugging her as she was about to step out the door. Although their day didn't end the way they wanted to, Kyoko tried to keep a straight face and just smile through the pain. Meanwhile, as soon as Kyoko left, Rei was left feeling guilty inside his gloomy apartment. And before he can even have the chance to just process the whole thing, the monster girl suddenly appears out of nowhere again, and as expected, she did the same thing to Rei that Rei couldn't even do to Kyoko. Meanwhile, on her way home, Kyoko feels a sense of relief after hearing that Rei doesn't really hate her. But after what happened, Kyoko made a decision to be more careful with her actions from now on. In the middle of the night, as she is walking down the streets of the town, Kyoko suddenly notices a spider web wrap around his wrist. Immediately, she removes it, thinking that maybe it just got caught when she was leaving Rei's apartment. However, for some reason, she suddenly felt a presence lurking in the shadows, seemingly looking at her. After all the disappearances in town lately, she immediately runs home without knowing that something bad will happen to her soon. Rei was always alone, and surely that will never change. It seems like back when he was in high school, something bad and traumatizing happened to him. During that time, a man named Akutsu Jr. tried to be friends with him, and let's just say, Akutsu was really of big help to him than he expected. Just those memories indeed make Rei wonder how life was harsh on him ever since before. Although he thought everything would pretty much change by now, the fact that this monster girl appeared out of nowhere, and is ruining his life once again really made Rei wonder just how harsh this world could ever get. It has been weeks since this girl appeared, and it seems like Rei is starting to get irritated by how clingy she is. For the first time in a while, he went on to tell the girl to just stay away, even for just a minute, since all that she does is hug him every morning, yet she is still not satisfied. When he finally found the time to breathe, Rei immediately checked his phone to see if Kyoko had messaged him already. Thankfully, Kyoko started messaging him back, giving Rei a sense of relief since it seems that Kyoko no longer thinks about what happened last night. However, Rei still wants to apologize to her immediately and do something at the very least. But it seems like even doing that would be impossible considering this monster girl couldn't even last a minute without holding or clinging to Rei. In the end, Rei doesn't really know what this woman is thinking. Although they have pretty much been together for a week now, Rei still doesn't know anything about this girl. And the reason why is that she is even inside his room. He also doesn't know what it is that she is injecting into him when she is sucking his blood, and that is why her face is so identical to the girl who was killed a few weeks back. At this point, Rei has too many questions on her mind. since it is already hopeless to wait for this girl to speak. Ray thought that maybe it's already time for him to investigate this girl's identity himself. On top of that, since he is also running out of food in the refrigerator, Ray thought that maybe it was finally time to go for a run to the grocery store. Fortunately, Ray managed to notice that this girl doesn't really seem to hate him at all. So he thought that maybe if he just begged her to let him go for now to buy some groceries, she would allow it somehow. However, it seems like the girl doesn't understand any words Ray says. So to better explain where he is going, he tried to show her the map of the area and explain what he is going to do. But it seems like nothing is working at all. However, fortunately, Ray managed to think of something outside the box. Since every time he chased her out of his house, she always came back to his room. That is why, just to survive, Ray decided to just invite her to go out for now. After much observation, Ray managed to notice that this girl always disappears when someone enters his room, like when Kyoko visited him at that time. It seems like this girl always disappears like smoke and never shows herself to anyone but Ray. And if Ray is not mistaken, it seems like this girl is afraid of others except him. That is why he ended up with the conclusion that from a human point of view, no one can see her other than him. With that being said, somehow, Ray can finally go out and buy all the necessities he needs. At the grocery store, while Ray is looking through the aisle, he bumped into an old friend, and it's none other than Junya. Since it has been a long time since they have seen each other, Junya decided to invite Ray to his apartment to have a drink and just catch up a bit. While at it, Junya expresses how worried he is about Ray since they never really see each other on campus anymore. On top of that, Ray's face is also a bit pale too, as if he is sick or something. Little did Junya know his friend was literally being haunted by a monster in a cute young girl's appearance. Since this has been long time due catching up, Junya went all in and asked his friend about his relationship with Kyoko. Just like any other boy, Junya was curious if Ray had already gone to kiss his girl during their aquarium date. Now that Junya has already mentioned it, Ray starts feeling bad again as his relationship with Kyoko has been tarnished because of what he did to her last night. Thinking that his friend is just having a petty fight with his girlfriend, Junya tried to make Ray feel okay, even for just a minute. He then starts boasting about how he is such an expert on love, and because of that, he will do everything to give Ray some tips to make sure his next date doesn't go wrong anymore. Although Junya can sometimes be a little bit too much for some, Ray is so thankful that he has him as his friend. The two then went on to talk for hours. Then suddenly Junya noticed that they were already out of cigarettes, so he immediately offered to go buy some. While Junya is at it, Ray decides to just go outside the balcony and breathe some fresh air. There, the cold breeze of the night hugged his skin so tightly. Ray then notices Junya's neighbor playing his guitar. While the man plays his instruments, with background music playing in the back, Ray suddenly thought of the monster girl again. At this point, he starts to realize that maybe she will not reveal her appearance in places with many people. But the thought that this monster can just shapeshift into a creature and follow Ray around kind of scares Ray a little. With this thought in mind, Ray is worried that he might never get out of this trap ever again. But the thought is that as long as he is with someone, maybe that monster won't show up again. Even for the moment, it's only his supposition, but Ray is hoping that he'll never see her again. However, as soon as his heart started to ease, something unexpected happened. A spider suddenly appeared out of nowhere. This time around, he is going towards Junya's neighbor. But before Ray can even act upon it, Junya arrives bringing fresh sets of cigarettes for them to enjoy. However, to make it even worse, Ray immediately notices the spider web clinging to Junya's shoulder. At this point, he knows that no matter what he does, it will still not be enough to make that monster go away. Worried that his friend might get dragged into this nightmare, Ray immediately asks Junya where he got that spider web. Junya immediately explained that he tried to take a shortcut on the way here, and he pretty got caught in a web. Ray then starts to convince himself to calm down. After all, spiders, except that woman, don't scare him at all. So as long as it is not her, everything's fine, Ray told himself. But it seems like his body language says otherwise. Things then started to spiral, and Ray finds himself outside his apartment with a gruesome scene to witness. Dead bodies of dismembered human beings are scattered everywhere. Some don't have legs anymore, while some are just gruesomely crushed to death. But what really traumatized the hell out of Ray is the image of his dead body being wrapped in spider webs. As the scene starts to intensify, Ray suddenly wakes up from his nightmare. It seems like he was just dreaming a while back. After drinking that much alcohol for the night, both Junya and Ray were literally knocked out. However, despite Junya accompanying Rei, the girl nonetheless went on to do her nightly routine with Rei. As she starts to suck on Rei's blood out in the balcony, Junya managed to wake up and ask his friend what he is doing. Confused at what is happening, Junya immediately checks on Rei. However, it seems like Rei has already lost his mind and is now in deep despair and desperation to get away from that monster, no matter what. But since Junya doesn't really know what is happening to him, he just tries to calm his friend down. At this point, Rei is starting to panic attack. But to make it worse, it seems like the monster is starting to learn how to speak. Knowing how grave the situation is now, Rei immediately decided to leave, as this may have caused his friend a lot of harm. When asked by Junya what was going on, Rei just went on to state that something urgent had come up and that he had to go now. Rei now finally understands that he can't simply solve this problem by staying with others. So to make sure he doesn't leave his friend hanging, he just went on to state that the situation he is currently in is beyond words. Without even saying his proper goodbye, Rei immediately rushes out and is now on the way back home. At this point, the thought of also staying away from Kyoko crossed his mind as well. It seems like Rei doesn't want to cause his friends and loved ones any more trouble. Since, based on the looks of it, this monster is no ordinary one, and is definitely so dangerous to mess with. As he passed by the playground, it seemed like Rei's speculations were right after all. To his surprise, the same neighbor who was singing beside him a while ago is now dead. His body is tied and hanged in the playground grills. To make it worse, part of his internal organs were also removed without any trace, just like what happened to Mibara. Now that everything is finally making sense, Rei starts to feel sick to his stomach. As he starts to think of it, there was also a strange murder involving a high school girl where all the internal organs were removed. And at this point, Rei finally knows who the culprit is of all these mysterious murders. Since this is now getting out of hand, Rei decided to talk to his uncle, who turned out to be police officer Daisuke, about the murders. During dinner, Daisuke prepared some hot pot for the two of them to enjoy as they talked about murders. As soon as Rei finally got the chance to talk to his uncle, he immediately asked him about any news about the happenings in town lately. Daisuke immediately showed a defeated look on his face, stating that they are starting to get a bit hopeless of getting any chance of actually catching this serial killer. On top of that, it seems like Daisuke is also getting criticized by the chief for pointing his nose and risking his life on the front lines. Daisuke also finds the people at the forensics department were also foolish. At this point, Daisuke can't deal with eating this nice-looking hot pot because of the murders. But that set aside for now, Daisuke then wonders why Rei is even curious about the murders. But since it seems like his nephew is really into it, Daisuke just went on to tell him everything he knows about the case. In this case, there were 6 people, including the victim Rei found. The first victim is an honorary member of the Okada Shingo 37 construction company. The cause of death seems to be an industrial machine, so it wasn't really talked about by the people at first. Then the second victim appeared, Mibara Yuko, age 17. A few days before the body was found, the police received a missing person search report. The report said all the internal organs had been removed, but it is not easy to say in a few words. And based on the description in the reports, the victim's body, well, it was as if she were preyed upon by some monstrous creature. According to Daisuke, he finds that incident so strange as well since the forensics claim that it is the result of a ghost or monster attacking a human being. To make it worse, Daisuke then went on to continue stating that the other bodies are just as bad as the rest. The third victim's hands and feet were cut off and placed in the atrium of a university. The fourth victim is surrounded by his limbs like it were a magic ritual, and the torso was also holding his severed head. Meanwhile, every part of the fifth victim's body was dissected evenly and then scattered on the road with no care whatsoever. And then there's the sixth victim. Hearing all of these horrific descriptions, Rei then went on to ask his uncle if there was a chance that these murders were caused by the same person. Now that Rei has already mentioned it, Daisuke then suddenly remembered that there seems to be a link with the murder of the second and subsequent victims. All the victims after the subsequent murders were similar to Mibara's case, where all internal organs were removed. Several organs, including the brain, were taken from the 4 other victims. 1 or 2 organs were missing, and the only one missing is Mibara Yuko. The third victim had the stomach taken, while the fourth had his liver taken, and the fifth victim had its lung and kidneys taken. Despite all of these happenings being odd and unimaginable, no one really knows what the motive of the murderer is. If it is a mad killer or a pervert with an organ fetish, Daisuke is certain that there is no way it could be the doings of a ghost or a monster, as everyone in the office tries to tell him. However, it seems like Rei already knows the truth, that these murders were not done by any human being, but instead an entity that tries to look like one. Rei is certain that as soon as his uncle arrives, the monster disappears and hides somewhere. Or maybe there's something more to this story than what Rei had thought of. But since he is still not sure about anything, Rei tries to keep everything he knows to himself, as he is also sure that his uncle will not believe him that easily. As they were about to dig in with the food, Daisuke suddenly got a call from someone. It seems like the 7th victim has been discovered. As his uncle left, Rei started to feel a little guilty about it. He then starts to state that he feels a bit sorry for his uncle. Although he can't say anything about the murder case, Rei is certain that this monster might have something to do with the murders for sure. As soon as his uncle left his apartment, Rei immediately went to his bedroom. And just as expected, the girl is waiting for him inside. As she went on to give him a hug, Rei couldn't help but wonder what this woman even did before she came here. When the neighbor was killed, the news came out that the 7th victim was gone. And during that time, Rei couldn't find any trace of this woman. At this point, he actually starts to wonder if this is all just a coincidence, or maybe he is just overthinking things a little too much. Although there is almost no evidence to confirm that yet, Rei doesn't know what to do with this woman. But if she dares to hurt his loved ones, Rei would not even hesitate to kill her. Just what this woman does to him every day, they are at it again today. This time, it seems like she is getting a bit intense with her moves, and Rei couldn't help but feel uncomfortable with it. Rei is already hopeless at this point. The fact that he is being manipulated by this woman, mimicking what lovers do to each other, really is the worst. And the fact that he didn't even do this first to Kyoko, his real girlfriend, made the feeling even worse. However, no matter what he does, he can't seem to fight it at all. While he trembles in fear and anger, this girl is literally trembling with joy. Meanwhile, somewhere in the university, Kyoko and Junya were able to bump into each other in the same class. Since this is the only time they would be able to talk with one another, Junya immediately grabbed this opportunity to ask Kyoko about Rei. While she is working on one of her paintings, Junya went on to inform her that he had happened to meet Rei the other day and invited him to his house for a drink. But the next series of events that spiraled really shocked Junya to the core. He tried to summarize everything to Kyoko, stating that Rei was acting a bit weird that day. On top of that, they're finding that the